And we're live. What is up, guys?
How are you, Cameron?
That's your first question. It's a hardball question. What's up? I got to get ready. All right. So I just want to introduce these guys. I've got you. You can see Stephen Dunson's name here. I've mentioned his name before. I honestly haven't gotten to know Bill much at all, but he kind of is a part of Stephen's story. But I want to give you a little history on how me and Stephen crossed paths. And I should have asked you this before we started, Stephen, but hey, just nobody's listening. Nobody's watching. We're good. But Stephen, is it appropriate if I don't mention any names? Should I refrain from talking about your staff?
No.
Okay. All right. Sweet. All right. So here we go. So here's what happened. I think the first time I heard about Stephen Dunson and integritax.net, that's where you can find these guys, is whenever I was at the appraisal district, I'm protesting, and I've got some of my key people at the appraisal district that have a generous heart. They are truly there to help and serve the public, to help and serve people that are looking to protest their property taxes. And you can tell the amount of personal care and attention that some of the staff and employees at the appraisal district had for just the normal old Joe walking in the door was just deep and caring, and they were as helpful as they could possibly be. And I'm not going to mention her name, but my favorite person on earth, I should say at the appraisal district, I've got to rank my wife ahead of her, but she's not far. But my favorite person, all of a sudden, I went to the appraisal district and she had disappeared. And I said, where did this person go? And I find out all of a sudden she's working at your company. And I'm like, dadgummit, man, that was this person. And whenever I talk about how I will thank and say positive things about the staff at the appraisal district, there's a list of them that have just been enormously helpful. And this one person she helped me tremendously, and she didn't treat me different than anybody else. She treated everybody with the same amount of generosity, savvy, and expertise. And so when I found out she started going to work for you, I was like, who is this guy? You know, it's like, you know, I can't hate you, but I'm like, dadgummit, you stole the best person, you know. And anyway, I started researching, and I can't remember how we actually got in contact with each other. But when we had a meeting with all the tax consultants, I wanted everybody to get together, share ideas, and talk about how what problems exist in the system, how could it improve. You're at the top of the list of folks that I invited, and we all met together with the top tax agents in the Metroplex that I know of. And man, when you spoke, everybody shut up and listened, and it was like, this is the guy that the professionals are learning from. And so that was my introduction. And so I thought, if I'm going to share, I don't know what you're going to be willing to share or how much people are going to get out of this, but I can just tell you, this is the guy that he knows a tremendous amount, tremendous history. So I will shut up for a second. We all want to hear from you. Let me just start by asking Stephen, I want to get into some nuts and bolts. I think one thing that we haven't talked a whole lot about is how to protest on commercial property accounts. I don't know much about it. I don't take on commercial accounts. I refer them to plenty of people. I don't know if anybody I've referred to you. I just started referring folks to you, but I can fully say if I had a commercial property I need to protest on, I would absolutely call you guys. I'm confident you're worth every penny you charge. It's a valuable service. And but I want you to go into detail, explain a little bit about that. But before we do, I want to find out a little bit about how you got into the business and just get a little bit about your story about how you got from not being in property tax land to being where you are today. So take it away. How'd you get started, Stephen?
Well, long time ago, golly, it's 30 years ago now. Bill, right here, got me into it. He and I were both fraternity brothers in college, and we both graduated from Southwest Texas State. Now it's called Texas State University. We had urban and regional planning degrees. And at the time, the only thing you could really do with that profession was going to be a city planner. And so I was going down that route, going to be a city
Are you willing to share what year this is?
Well, let's see.
89.
89, yeah.
All right, got it.
Yeah. So I was going to go down that route, and then Bill knew we were in the same classes in college together. Bill knew I was looking, and he called me up one day and said, hey, we got some jobs over here. He was already working at Tarrant Appraisal District. And he told me, you ought to come down here and apply. And I had never heard of an appraisal district before Bill had called me and told me about it. So that's kind of how I got into it, was through Bill. And Bill and I have worked together a couple of places over the years. We worked at Ernst & Young together back in the day when Ernst & Young was really expanding their property tax practice nationwide. And then Bill and I have just been, real close ever since. And so that's kind of how I got into it 30 years ago. I started out in the residential department at Tarrant, did that for 1 year, and then went over to the commercial for 1 year.
Wait, what do you mean started there? What did you do?
Well, in my first year there, I did residential appraisals and appeals for the residential department at Tarrant.
Okay, no. Were you an employee there, or were you? Whoa! All right, I didn't know that. See, look, we're just getting to know each other. I tell you what, we're peeling the onion back, and there's layers here. All right, so you used to work at the appraisal district,
right? I used
all right,
to work
so
there.
It's like the retirement plan of all the employees at the appraisal district is when you quit working at TAD, you go right over to Integratech. All right, I see what's going on.
Well, see,
okay.
And Bill got me in. Bill was already over there.
Okay,
Bill was
all right.
already over there. And so
back up for just a second. Now that I know what you're talking about, what did you do as an employee at TAD?
I did what their current employees, appraisers do. I was a residential staff appraiser. I assessed properties, represented those properties in hearings, and we talked to customers, the customer service counter over the phone. We'd go out and measure the properties and make sure the dimensions we had and everything were correct, and that there was really a house here or there wasn't a house or stuff like that. And it was a lot of fun. Met a lot of really good people during that time when I was there. And then my second year there, I worked in commercial department, and that's where Bill was. And Bill can kind of tell his story. It's very similar to mine. Why don't you tell him?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. I came home in May of '89, and my grandmother was a realtor in East Fort Worth. It was called Virginia Hopkins Real Estate. And I was sitting in there, just graduated, had my real estate license, but it was a real estate boom. I mean, the bust, RTC, the FDIC it was bailout time, and back in the day, and there really wasn't any jobs available. And a lady came in who's actually still at TAD. I won't say her name, but she's a wonderful person in commercial research. And I heard her up front talking to my grandmother, and she said, my grandmother asked her, do you have any appraiser positions down there? And I heard the girl say, we sure do. We have one in commercial land. Send it down. I went down there, and the next Monday I got the job. And so I was there about 9 months before Stephen graduated, and I went straight into land and commercial. And then, like you said, I contacted him about some residential positions, and that's where it all began.
All right. Well, that explains a lot. That explains a lot. That is very interesting, and it's no wonder why when there's a question and there are a bunch of tax agents in a room and Stephen's got an answer, your history in Tarrant County, specifically at TAD, is it goes deep. So you literally have inside information. You know what it looks like on the other side of the counter, and you've been one of those appraisers that people walk in off the street just mad, and they come in and yell at an appraiser, and you were one of those that got yelled at, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I did had a couple come over the counter at us.
You know what's really interesting? I mean, you said that at that time there were a lot of good people that worked there, and I mean, right now you just haven't been an employee there, so you never know who. I mean, there's got 200 something employees. I attest to the experience I've had with a lot of people. They've got a lot of good employees. If you don't hire them all away, then they'll still have more. But that's really, really interesting that. Anyway, all right. Well, hey, let's just hop right into it. Gosh, dog, look, I have talked a lot about residential, and I've gone over the basics like crazy. And it's almost like you can't go over the basics enough, because if somebody is going to mess up this process, it's because they just don't know the basics. If you just have a place to start, and if you need to get some comps, and you need to get some data to show the condition issues, then that gives you a fighting chance, right? Then there's a lot of stuff. You got to adjust the comps. You got to make sure you have repair estimates. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can do that to make sure that you're really going all the way with it. But I feel like I've kind of exhausted those things in other conversations. And I know it's without watching every video I've done, it's going to be kind of hard to know what I haven't done, what I haven't gone over. But let's just I would just want your perspective. Let's go on the residential side for just a moment before we switch over to commercial and talk about how to protest in commercial. But so on the residential side, knowing what you know, what are some things that homeowners can do or that tax agents, anybody protesting on residential properties, what are some things that people can do that most everybody isn't aware of? It's a little bit beyond the basics that if they just knew, or if they just did X, Y, and Z, it would help them tremendously. What would you say?
First thing I would recommend is always take pictures. Pictures,
Okay.
the old saying, a picture speaks 1,000 words. That's the number one thing I would do, because you got to remember, most of the sales that you're being compared to are properties that have been all prettied up and dolled up and put on the market. And your house that you live in is not going to be in that same condition as those houses that are selling that have been all fixed up. So that's my number one thing I tell people when they call in is, do you have any pictures you can share with us showing either the functional or physical obsolescence with your property?
Okay. So when you say photos are number one, would you rank that above an estimate, a repair estimate?
What would you do, Bill?
Well, I mean, having a current repair estimate's great. And if you have that, I don't know that I'd rank it above it, but certainly with it would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Can't fake a photo. I mean,
No.
it's hard to. No. It's hard. I guess you can fake anything these days, but it's a lot harder. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. All right. I interrupted because I just wanted to ask that. All right. So what else?
So I would say that, if you have problem neighbors, problem location, like you back up to a strip center, you're on a busy street, you've got to discount that, because that's going to definitely affect the market value of your house. And, it may not be readily visible to the appraisal district or the ARB members. So I would for sure point out something like that would detract from the value of your house. If you got a neighbor next door who's consistently lets their grass grow out and doesn't maintain their yard or something like that, I would definitely take pictures of that. Because if you think about it, if you're going into the market to buy a home and you see something like that at a neighboring property, you're going to discount that property you're purchasing. I don't care, if you think, oh, well, one day this person might fix their property up, or one day this might change. What's the current condition when you're going to buy that property? That's what I would say is a big factor in is, what are the neighboring properties like?
Okay, so this is an area that's caused me great frustration, and so I want to get your take on it. I want to know how much somebody could expect, how much value somebody could expect to get for this kind of thing. So let's just say somebody, and I know that it's impossible to answer this with full certainty, like you don't have a crystal ball, but I just want to get your perspective on it. If somebody's got a $300,000 house, and their neighbor is, hey, they live in an area, there's no HOA or whatever. And so the neighbor's got the junked out car in the lawn and grass is growing up, and they don't have any repair estimates, but they've got photos. Let's just say they've done a great job. They've documented how crummy their neighbors are with date stamped photos for a period of time. Then if they walk in with that evidence at the appraisal district, how much would they expect to get off of that $300,000 notified value? What would you say?
What would you say, Bill? It's going to be tough. You can't really say a number on it. I'd say at least a percentage-wise, I'd say 5 to 10% off the value of that house, because it's going to really, bring that property down in the price.
How about that?
I wouldn't buy a house with a troubled neighbor next door. I mean, I'd stay away from that. And we were just looking at some houses about 2 weeks ago for a client/friend of ours out of San Antonio looking to move his daughter up here. And we looked in a high dollar area as far as price per square foot. And there was 3 or 4 houses he looked at that he just immediately drove by and he saw it. He saw the neighbor next door and he said, I don't care how great this house is, I'm not going to buy it because of the house next door. And that's a big factor in my opinion of what's going on out there.
Gotcha. So the thing that I run into constantly whenever I bring evidence like that in is let's just paint the picture for everybody that aren't aware of the basics. Whenever I go to protest formally, I'll go in and I'm representing the homeowner, right? Or you're representing the homeowner, and then you'll have the appraisal district that is representing or you got an appraiser representing the appraisal district, and then you have the 3-person panel, which basically acts almost like a jury, right? So if I present that kind of evidence in the rebuttal that the appraisal district gives, then almost all the time they say, well, that's cosmetic. We don't count cosmetic, right? And then So what do you do with that? How do you get past, like it seems to me like the appraisal district speaks, they speak with authority, and then that 3-person panel tends to give more weight to the appraisal district at times. And so how do you counteract that, or what is there anything that you do that you use to be, to get that 3-person panel to agree with you and to acknowledge that? Is there any kind of advice you can give on that?
Well, it's really hard, because what you're trying to do is quantify what is that negative adjustment going to be, and it's tough, but you got to hope that the panel would understand that it would detract to them too if they were looking. But it's kind of like your conversation with Garland yesterday with adjustments. Size, location, age, condition. Those we all know about, and we know how to get, for the most part, we know how to get to what the amount of adjustment is. But when you start talking about stuff like floodplain and aesthetics, people not taking care of the property and nuisance, things like that, it's all over the board, and it is tough to quantify.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I just, I want to ask, because I know that's something that I'll go in there and I'll present, I'll have great argument, great evidence. And I'm like, I know this is solid. I see it happen. I do everything I can. And then sometimes that you just have to count on a quality 3-person panel to independently think and weigh the evidence. All right. I just saying it. I mean, that honestly, that's where your experience comes into play. It's hard to write a rule book, but when you've seen, thousands of protests like you guys have, then obviously there's maybe a nuance to it that when you have that conversation on just being able to explain it, and hard to put a finger on. All right, let's switch gears. Is there anything else that you just feel like you really feels important you need to share on the residential side before we hop over and talk more about commercial?
No, just protest, just show up. Just
show up.
Protest. And they're really good about working with you informally. I just say, I'd show up, make sure you protest, and whenever you protest, make sure you also check value unequal, because that's a huge way to get some additional relief for property owners, because the appraisal review boards will take the lower of your market value or value unequal. And I can't tell you how many times we get people who've protested on their own. They call us in to go do the hearing. They go do the equity portion of the hearing, and they didn't check that. That's available to every single property owner throughout the state of Texas. No exceptions, no limitations. So if it's a commercial downtown high rise, or if it's a $40,000 house over in some part of Fort Worth or Dallas or Houston, everybody gets the unequal hearing as well, as long as you check it and protest it.
Okay, that is such a huge tip. I want to let me talk about that, and then I want to go back to something else you mentioned that I just feel like is a key nugget that if people get this, it will significantly help. All right, what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to share my screen so people can kind of understand exactly what you're talking about. And this is something, I've told people this, but I really have not mentioned how to do this, or what. There's something you mentioned that's extremely valuable. All right, hold on. I've got to increase the size of the screen if I can. Let's see if it's going to work. Yeah. Here we go. All right. Going with technology on the fly. This is the back of a protest form, right? A value notice. Okay. So you don't have to use this form, but if you get your blue value notice in the mail and you just flip it over, then this is what the back of it looks like. We just reduplicated it so people could fill in the blanks if they just went online and got the front side. So what Stephen is talking about is right here. You've got all these different types of protests. Most people only think that there's one way that you can argue. And what he's saying is, no, there's a bunch of different ways. But the thing you need to make sure you do is check this second box that says value unequal. And here's the thing I have not stressed that you nailed, is that if you go in and you check both of these boxes, that allows you to be able to protest basically using all available data that a homeowner would think to get, and they'll give you the lower of the two values. It basically increases your odds of getting a reduction and getting the maximum reduction. And I think that that's something that if people didn't know that they would actually get the lower of the two values, it might keep them from checking that box and giving that a shot, because they would think, well, what if the next protest they come out with a higher value? It doesn't work like that. It's going to be the lower of the two. Man, that's a huge tip. Awesome, man. One other thing, and you're going to have to watch another video to get more information about what an unequal protest is. We don't have time. Today's interview is just 30 minutes, and I want to get to commercial. One last tidbit. You mentioned something when we were talking about what's better, using photos or estimates. You said that it's hard to say which one's better, but you said anything to improve or to prove a functional obsolescence. Or then you threw out some other kind of obsolescence. What did you say?
Physical.
Or a physical obsolescence. Here's the thing. Look, guys, are y'all both appraisers?
Well, background in appraisal.
Background in appraisal. Okay. Yeah. You've taken classes on appraisal.
Sure.
Done a ridiculous. You used to be an appraiser at the appraisal district. If you walk in and you've got documentation to show that there is a functional obsolescence. What does functional obsolescence mean in a real quick definition? What would you say?
Something related to that. If the house was poorly designed,
okay,
flawed with it. The example we're talking about though, with the undesirable possible neighbors or whatever, that would be more economic obsolescence in my opinion. And then there's physical, which is just regular depreciation.
Physical obsolescence. All right. So here's the takeaway for me. If you bring in photos and estimates, you don't have to understand what functional, economic, physical obsolescence is. All you need to know is that if you speak those words out to the person behind the counter or at the protest hearing, then they'll think, wait, this person's done their homework. They know their stuff. They're smarter than the average bear, and it'll possibly allow your argument to be a little bit more convincing. Would you agree with that or no?
Yes.
I think so.
All right. They're going to look at you and they're going to say, you're not the average person that's just walked in pissed without any evidence. All right. I think that's awesome, man. All right. Let's go to commercial real quick. You guys do a lot with commercial properties, right?
Correct.
Do you have any kind of stats on how much, property value you've protested on the last year or anything that you can point towards or any kind of big name clients you want to mention or anything, just to give people some context on your experience level?
Well, the Forward Business Press has ranked property tax consulting firms for the last few years. We've always been number one, number two, right around there as far as volume and dollar value and so forth. So we do quite a bit of commercial. We have 4 people doing commercial right now, 4 agents doing commercial.
Awesome.
So we're one of the larger firms doing commercial. And, I don't know if we want to tell who all the clients are and everything, but,
it's up to you.
Well, our commercial is not limited to downtown high-rise, multi-million-dollar properties. We do everything that is commercial. We'll do it. We'll look at it for you. We think we can help you out. We'll definitely give it a shot. And,
awesome.
We don't have $1 million minimum value or anything like that. Just call us up, let us look at it. We'll be happy to help you.
All right. So
we have stuff in other states.
Yeah.
Arizona, Nevada, California.
You name it. All over. It's all over.
That I don't know how you do it. I'm like Tarrant County has got to be so busy. I'm like, I can't see straight, man. It's insane. But let's give people that don't have a clue of how to protest on commercial property. Can you just go over the nuts and bolts basics? Let's just say if somebody wanted to do it on their own, they didn't want to hire you. First of all, I'd say that you'd be dumb when there's that much money on the line. Probably hire somebody who knows what they're doing. I can guarantee you somebody that's seen the inside of the appraisal district is going to know a thing or two that could save you $1 or $2 extra than you'll know just figuring it out on your own. But just for those of us, just to give us an idea and educate us, how do you protest on commercial property? How would somebody go about doing that? What kind of evidence? And if you could just give us kind of the 101 rundown, it'd be great.
But it's commercial. I mean, they haven't really used sales as much as they do in residential the last few years. Commercial, particularly in Tarrant, Dallas, some of the bigger counties, they're going with the financials on the property. What type of income do you have? What type of expenses? And there's certain market ranges that they'll use on those. They have their own. The appraisal district has their own studies as far as warehouses in this part of the county on lease for this range of per square foot. So if you come in there with something really low, really ridiculous, they're going to look twice at it. They're going to say, hey, that's a little low. We got to get that income stream up on it. So income's been the primary factor the last few years in determining commercial valuations. So let's say you're an owner-occupied property. You don't lease it out. The district will have information that they
Okay,
use.
so this is like if you have a restaurant,
Right.
and you own the property and you operate the restaurant inside your own building that you own. This is what you're talking about. All right, continue.
Right. There has to be a lease type agreement between two individual parties. Can't be, oh, I'm leasing to my company internally. They're not going to accept that because that's not going to be your true reflection of the market. But the biggest thing to remember as far as lease comps or whenever you're looking at properties on an income basis is the tax code specifically says use market data. Well, if you have a lease on your property that's 5 years old, whether it's higher or lower than the current market, that's not really as relevant as what are comparable properties leasing for now around January 1st. You have a certain expense range. There's different type of expenses. There's a gross lease where basically the owner of the property pays all the expenses, taxes, insurance, maintenance, that kind of stuff. There's triple net leases where basically the tenant pays almost all those expenses. So you got to know what type of lease you're looking at, what they're comparing you to, whether or not you think you could actually get that for your property. And then, of course, with commercial property, there's also the equity argument too. Is you don't want to have a strip center and one across the street, and the guy across the street is getting better clients, better quality clients, and receiving more revenue just because his expenses are lower, because he's fought his property taxes and you haven't across the street. So that's what I would, that's just kind of nuts and bolts as far as the commercial end is that, that's the only additional way we argue commercial. We don't do residential through the income method.
Gotcha. Okay. Let me just recap because I know for a lot of people, the majority of people don't own commercial property that I'm in conversation with. But at the same time, we do have plenty of people that have commercial property. They want to know more about it. So if you don't have commercial property, I just want to get a little bit of recap, see if I can understand. All right. So there's different ways that an appraiser or the appraisal district or anybody can value a property. One of them is the market approach, which is looking at what other properties have sold for, right? And then the other way is, or market comparison. The other way is an income approach. And you're saying that to prove how much income a property is bringing in, then there's a way to calculate the value of the property based on that, the income and expenses of that property. Am I doing good so far?
Correct.
Okay. So then you just kind of, funneling or kind of, you focus the efforts more on proving what the income and expenses are of the properties, because that will establish the value. But from there, it kind of splinters off. You've got owner occupied property. So that's like if you own the restaurant, you own the building and you operate the restaurant inside of it, you own everything, versus if you're just the building owner and you're leasing it out to a restaurant.
Right.
So if you're leasing it out to a restaurant and you just own the structure, then you would take that lease in. Is that right?
Right.
Yes. You'd look at
if it's a recently signed lease.
Recently signed, right.
If I was a commercial property owner and I've never protested before, how would I find out what properties have leased for nearby? That is, I mean, what is there a commercial MLS, or how do people get their hands on that data?
That's a good question. And you'll like this one, but
all right.
From the district's website, under the data with downloads, they have really good Excel spreadsheet, but it's their rent comps. And you basically just open that up and you'll see their rent comps on there. And so let's say we're talking about Pizza Hut, Pizza Inn, whatever. You'll find them on there in the restaurants. And if they have the rent comps, which they will have, the TAD may have gotten those through certain surveys. They may have gotten them through appraisals. They may have gotten them through us, agents. But the rent comps are available. But you also mentioned the internet. Yes, CoStar is where CoStar LoopNet. That's where we get a lot of our rent comps.
All right.
It's a big part of it.
So you're saying CoStar and LoopNet would be your MLS, but you just taught me something that I wasn't aware of, and I have got to see this for myself. Holy mackerel. You know what, man? Well, I don't do commercial, so I wouldn't know. All right, look. So all I did is I went to tad.org. You hover over the resources. You go to data download. I'm wearing this section out right here. This is all residential stuff. But what you're talking about, I've never scrolled down and looked at this.
It's right there.
These are their comps right there for everybody to see. Woo! All right, man. That's awesome. Look, I tell you what, this is just crazy. I mean, I've done a lot of protesting. I've done very, very little commercial. I just know. Here's what I know. It's not worth doing yourself if you're not going to invest the time to really learn it inside and out. As much as it might cost to hire somebody, whatever amount that costs is going to be small to the amount of money you might leave on the table if you do it yourself and you just don't know what you're doing. That's the lesson that I've gotten. And so this information I think is huge for somebody that's wanting to learn it. I think is a great place to start. Y'all have given some great tips, but man, we're just scratching the surface here. And, the basics is a great place to start on this stuff. And I mean, I tell you what, it's almost like from this point, I don't know where to go. All right, man. Hey, let's wrap this up. I know I know you guys are as busy as you can be this time of year. I am too. We got to hop off, get back to work. But is there anything else that you want to share, or any other tips, or anything that you want to tell people before we get off?
I just say, the deadline to protest in Tarrant this year is end of May 31st. Be sure and read your notice of value when the protest deadline is, and be sure you read it carefully, because sometimes they'll say your protest deadline is, say, June, on or before June 1st. And I would be sure to read that carefully. Dallas County this year, the protest deadline for majority of the properties is not until the middle of June. But we've gone ahead and protested all of our properties because there is a section of tax code which says if the value doesn't change from the preceding year, or if the value goes up less than $1,000, they're not required to send you a notice for the current year. And if you don't send you a notice, the deadline to protest is still May 15th. And we've seen across the state that I'd say about 60 to 65% of the appraisal districts across the state kept the May 15th protest deadline this year. Some of the bigger ones didn't, but Harris County, the largest appraisal district in the state, their deadline to protest this year was May 15th. They didn't delay notices like Tarrant, Dallas, Collin, Travis, most of the ones up here did. So I'd say, it's be unfortunate. I think it's kind of been a little bit misleading to the public, in that everybody thought their deadlines were being pushed back, when the reality is May 15th was a deadline for a lot of property owners. Now, let's say you didn't do May 15th. You can still file a late protest up through the end of January, but the criteria for qualifying for a late protest are a lot more harder to clear, those hurdles to win your appeal, than just a normal protest. But that's what's the biggest thing I want everybody to know, is that go ahead and file your protest now. Get them in, because you really want to get ahead of the curve on this thing.
Awesome, man. Great stuff. This is awesome, Stephen. If somebody wants to get a hold of you guys, hire you, or whatever, how would you like them to get a hold of you?
Our website is integritax.net. And that's important. That .net's real important, because sometimes people go to the wrong one. And we have a contact sheet there, and they can just email us. We're answering emails as fast as they come in. Nobody usually waits over a day for us to get back to them. And then we will set you up, and we'll get you, talk to you, make sure you're ready to go, and make sure we can help you out and send you a proposal. A lot of our proposals are contingency based. So like you were saying, we don't save you a lot of money. You won't owe us a lot of money. We just do it on contingency based on a lot of things.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you guys so much for taking time out to do this. Really appreciate you sharing. You definitely, I'll also say this. I didn't mention this. Well, another reason why we're in contact with each other is just because Stephen has reached out, seeing how we're out there helping people, and he's reached out to me personally and just said, just like any other tax agent you're going to hear me talk about, tax consultant, you'll hear me talk about, it's because they were generous in helping, just like I'm helping everybody. He's like, hey, look, man, they're in this to help people, and they're trying to help me help people. And if they see I've got a question or whatever, they got a tip for me or whatever, then they've just been very selfless and just doing what they can to help other folks. And so if you're going to hire somebody, look, not any one tax consultant is going to be the right answer for everybody, right? And if you're not going to do it on your own, then you want to reach out and hire somebody and pay them some money, pay these guys. If you got commercial property, go here. All right. Appreciate you guys. Y'all have a good one. Hang on for just 1 second. I'm going to click a button, then we can have another quick conversation. Appreciate it. See you.